Mesdames et messieurs,
The greatest festival of our contemporary society, the Olympic Games, is about to begin.
This is gonna be close.
Oh! They're all completely gassed! They've given it everything on the global bucket! Oh, yeah! No! Oh!
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. But that is an Olympic championship.
Ready?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Keep the Flame Alive, the podcast for fans of the Olympics and Paralympics. If you love the games, we are the show for you. Each week we share stories from athletes and people behind the scenes to help you have more fun watching the games. I am your host, Jill Jaracz, joined as always by my lovely co-host, Alison Brown. Alison, hello, how are you?
Hello. It has not been a great week.
No.
No. Well, let's start with the tragedy of the plane crash, and just our hearts go out to USA Figure Skating and all of our friends in the figure skating community who lost so many people on that flight. And then the following day, Dick Button dies, as if he could not handle that sadness. So, to all our figure skaters and figure skating fans, we are with you in that sadness.
Yeah, it was a tough loss, and so many skating clubs affected. And just immediately I thought of the 1961 crash.
Absolutely.
And how that just devastated the US skating team. So much young talent lost, and it's really, really sad. And
A lot of skaters, several of the skaters came from the skating club of Boston, and Nancy Kerrigan, who skated from that club herself, came out and spoke, and she was so eloquent and so heartfelt. And one of the things she said was, even when it's hard, you get up and keep going. That's kind of how I feel right now. Like you get up and you keep going.
Yeah. Yeah.
On a happier note, un año d'affaires. I didn't say that right, but I'm trying. I'm trying.
Yes, it is 1 year to go until Milan Cortina, and that means we are talking with our friend Ken Hanscom. Ken is the COO ticket manager and expert in Olympic travel planning. We talked with Ken about what you need to be doing now if you're planning a trip to Italy, because he's been on the scene. So if you plan to go next year and are trying to work out your travel plans and how you're going to get around an entire region of the country to see a whole bunch of winter sports, he's got some tips for you. Take a listen.
Ken Hanscom, thanks for coming back on. We have you every year to get ready for the next games.
It's my pleasure. It's can't believe it's already coming. Paris is just barely behind us, and we're almost like a year really a year away from Milan Cortina kicking off.
So we've seen the announcements for tickets.
Yeah.
What do we know about that part?
It's going to follow us, a very similar theme to I think what we saw at Paris, right? It's a same baseline technology, Eventum that we saw with Paris, and we have this kind of early bird phase where we have 350,000 people registered, probably very similar to what we saw with the early phase of Paris, and then later this year we get into kind of second phase, which I consider more open sales. I think in May, June, and that stuff usually moves around, so it's interesting. I'm interested to see what the demand is. There's not quite the same, let's call it, fervor over tickets, I think, as Paris, and Paris was incredible, and I think Milan Cortina will be incredible. I think the demand for winter is just very, very, very different, and I'm not the only one that's kind of been using this term, but it's really a game that's very spread out. And so when you think about going as a fan, and if you're I don't want to say a super fan or someone who likes to go to 15, 20, I did 36 events in Paris is what my total ended up being. I have to be a lot more deliberate than maybe I normally am to figure out where I'm going to start and where I'm going to go and how I'm going to do that. And so, yeah, I think this phase is nice. It's some people either are going or maybe local that want to get a nice pack, maybe some early bird, cheaper tickets. But then I think we'll see it continue to develop over time, with probably that first major on sale might be similar to what we saw with the lottery in Paris, and where you can really get some of the, if you get the right draw, you can get in there and get some of the best tickets for face value, which pretty reasonable price. So when whether it's figure skating, whether it's ice hockey finals, depending on what you're looking for.
Paris was the first time they did this ticketing system. What did you see from your professional angle that worked well, and like hiccups they had that they have to work on?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the first time they used a centralized system, but it's the same, I would say, pattern that's been repeated since London and before London, where we kind of have this early phase where there's maybe a smaller amount of tickets that maybe are either cheaper priced or bundled together or limited, and then we kind of go into this more formal, I would say, sales process as venues get capacities and all those sorts of things. I'm frankly very complimentary in terms of how the entire process worked for Paris for a super large event. Yes, I know there's a lot of criticism about not enough C's and D's. There's never ever going to be enough C's and D's tickets for the demand, especially for a summer game. Winter games are different, right? We're talking 1/5 to 1/8 the number of tickets that are out there. It's a spot. But when I look at things to improve on, maybe there was some of the delivery stuff that was closer to the games. I think that didn't that maybe took a little bit longer than people expect. But other than that, my perspective is I think the Paris ticketing process, again, you can disagree or agree about what it was fair and how it wasn't fair for whatever, right? The one argument might be is, hey, there weren't certain allocations set up for the people in France, which has traditionally been something that's happened local. It was more of a global thing. So I could argue that from my perspective, that I had a better chance than ever to get the tickets that I wanted, or people that were traveling to Paris. And we can argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that was the method they chose. When there were waiting rooms or those sorts of, I think, scenarios, they were not intolerable, right? If we look back to some of the early, I don't want to talk about previous ones. I mean, there was an 18-hour wait to find out whether or not you won a lottery at some point not too long ago. So when I look at kind of the execution, the delivery, I didn't have any scan issues or ticket issues when I was on the ground. Everyone was up in arms early on about whether mobile tickets are good or not. It's the way we do things here, at least in the United States now, and we're very used to it. I always have my tickets on my phone. There's no more paper tickets. Yes, I understand souvenirs, and actually from a corporate standpoint, it can be maybe a little bit more difficult to move things around last minute and change. But I think for when we look at a global system that had to serve 11 million tickets across up to 3 million people, depending on what numbers you look at of people that traveled and visited Paris. I think the ticketing system was a fantastic success.
How can we judge demand? Because we had a COVID Winter Games, we had an Asian Winter Games, then we had Russia, and a lot of people were advised not to travel there. And
Yeah.
then we're back, 2010.
I I don't know if we can. The proxy I'm using is what is the size of the Milan Cortina group as opposed to how it was for Pyeongchang and Paris, right? And then that group's sitting around, 1,200, 1,500. A lot of people probably immediately followed over from the Paris group, and the Paris group got to be 50,000 people. So, and I think by this point a year in advance, I think we were in the 20s. So, to me, it looks like it's about what I would expect it to be. Is a Winter Games demand is 1/5, 1/8, 1/10, 1/15 of what you see in a Summer Games. And it's more difficult. If you think about summer games, you're a family of four. It's super easy to say, hey, this is my summer vacation. I'm going to take my family over. We're going to go do that. But in February, do you have a ski week maybe, right? Or you have this and so if you look at the turnaround and to be able to go that, so I think it also just timing, it's just the way it is. It's not anyone's fault one way or the other. The timing of it, this year, it's going to compete directly with the Super Bowl. So if you look at the first weekend of opening ceremony, the first couple events, at least from a U.S. demand standpoint, it's going head first. That Sunday, that first Sunday is Super Bowl Sunday. So you're also going to see, I think, some of those things, really. Again, that's a U.S. centric view. I think from a European standpoint, right? When you look at that, yes, you have some of those challenges, perhaps with travel, with vacations that you don't have in the summer. But I think we might see a little bit more European demand than U.S. demand typically has been. I think when we get to Salt Lake, right? Salt Lake is not going to compete. I mean, I'm sure NBC is not real thrilled that this opening weekend is competing with the Super Bowl, and I'm sure Salt Lake won't.
And it's cold.
It is, but Italy's not Pyeongchang cold.
No.
I mean, the first weekend I was driving around there, the car I had, I never saw the temperature gauge get above 0 for the first week. Now the second week was balmy, comparatively speaking, but that first week, and I still, my Ashley still gives me a really hard time. She's like, "You didn't take any pictures once opening ceremony started in Pyeongchang." I said, "Yes, because it was -35 wind chill out there, and I couldn't move my hands to get to my phone. I didn't want to take off my gloves to take pictures." There's one picture of me, a selfie, standing with an empty stadium in the background, and that's the only picture I have from opening ceremony at Pyeongchang.
You mentioned the distance. So let's talk a little
Yes.
bit about our 4 centers of activity.
Yes. I've driven them all, by the way.
Okay, fantastic, because what I'm gonna ask you is, number 1, how far away are they really? Because I've looked on the map, but what does that really
Uh,
mean in terms of distance?
so I visited all the sites in June of 2023. And it took me 16 hours to get from Milan to Bormio, Livigno, then hit Predazzo, the ski jumping facility, and then coming all the way around, which also includes an 18-kilometer foray into Switzerland. Beautiful drive. You go over a couple of great mountains, Dolomites. Like Cortina is the most beautiful place that you've never been to. Like had no idea how just gorgeous that place was, and I will go there even if it's just for a day, regardless of sliding center or not, or any of those other sorts of things, just because that place is so gorgeous. But it took me 16 hours to do that trip. So I think day trips are really challenging. Even up to like Bormio Livigno. I think that's, it took me 2 hours, not driving slow in the summertime. Right. So if you think about potential for weather, if you think, and then if you think about if you're planning out programs, if you're planning out those sorts of things, I think it's very common that a lot of people are going to be based out of Milan. I'm personally planning probably a Milan base, and then maybe either a Venice or a Cortina base for a portion of it. Venice is fairly accessible, I think, up to Cortina. It's a 2 hour train ride sort of thing. But I think if you're looking at day trips, I think even with trains and whatever else, it's a bit challenging. And to get to some of the more remote places like Predazzo and like really specifically ski jumping, maybe even up to the biathlon venue, I think those are going to be challenging day trips from a major metropolitan center. So I think you're gonna have to think about hopping around a little bit, and that right when you're carrying bags and all this sort of, it's a little bit more painful than like in a place like Paris where you can just like unpack your bags for a month and you kind of feel a little bit like home, and then you go off and do what you're going to do. And I think you need to be very conscious of that as you think about what events you want to see, and the experiences that you want to have.
Is driving the only option from Milan?
For the trip I was going to do, it was. I looked at train and it actually hit all the sites, and like I had a very small 2 day window to do that. I think getting from Milan up to Bormio, for example, I think there is a train, but I'm not sure what the time frame is on it. I think it's close to 2.5, 3 hours. And so if your event's a night event, moguls or whatever it may be, you may not be able to get back depending on how the train schedules go. Right? If your event doesn't end until 11 or 12, whatever that may be, and again, they could extend the train schedule. We don't know what they are a year from now. And I think Venice is, you can get up to Cortina on a train in about 2 hours. So that's likely maybe something I do. Take a 5 a.m. train up, see a couple of sessions of maybe some skiing, maybe some curling, and then head back for the day. Because I think a lot of those hotels up in those smaller mountain towns are going to be taken by dignitaries, by teams, by athletes, by support, those sorts of things. Yes, there will be some available for fans, but again, if depending on what you're going to do, now if you're going to just go see one sport and park yourself in Cortina for a week, great. I think it'll be
Okay,
fantastic.
I do wanna go back to the hotels, but I do wanna ask a quick question about the driving. How was it actually driving those roads? I realize it was the summer.
Yeah, so getting a direct into Bormio was and Livigno, Livigno. I'm butchering the name, so you'll have to
No, you're actually doing very
forgive me.
well.
Okay, okay. My wife we have family in Italy, and they're probably listening to me. They'd be like, "Oh my gosh, like stop." But the direct roads to there and back to Milan was great. But then when I decided to go between the venues, it was switchbacks. It was very slow going, 25, 30 miles. And I remember like mentioning to Ash, I was like, "Can you imagine doing this in a bus?" Right. If you're on a program and doing this like a bus trip for the day or something like that, and I think that's what you'll see. Is I think you'll see some of the hospitality groups. They'll run at least up to that particular cluster. They'll probably run some day trips up there.
'Cause I fear for my life trying to drive that.
Yeah, I mean, summer it was fine, and it's beautiful countryside. I mean, it is just words don't describe it until you've seen it. I've traveled quite a bit. I've seen a lot of things, and the beauty just blew my mind away. We had such a fantastic time. It's something that we hadn't experienced before.
Okay, hotels. You mentioned there's not a ton of hotels up in the mountains, so
Yeah.
what can people expect in terms of availability there?
I think that's going to be competitive. It's going to be competitive like we saw, maybe in Paris. And you're going to see that sort of, I would say, typical Olympic behavior. I think Milan's going to be pretty simple. I think if your base is going to be Milan for a couple of weeks or a week or something, I think there's going to be readily available hotels for that. Maybe not right away, but I think as we get closer, when we look at from a demand perspective, and even Venice. And again, I don't know how many programs are planning to run out of Venice. That's just something that I'm considering for myself for a couple day trips up to Cortina. Given where I would like to stay, I know that hotel's not available, so I know it's taken, so I won't be able to get in there. So I'll probably end up staying down in Venice.
In the past, you have talked about waiting for hotels is not a bad strategy because they'll open up as federations and NOCs have to fill
Yeah.
out their blocks. Do you think this will happen again? Or are we talking about in some clusters it'll be too tight?
I have a dear friend who doesn't book things until 48 hours before the Olympics, and he did the same thing with Paris, and he got a very good room. So I personally don't have the pay. Like, it really depends on what your tolerance for uncertainty is, and it's not for pain or the potential of not having. I think it's really uncertainty, and I think a lot of people who are planning a trip who've bought all these tickets, they want some level of certainty. I do think that we will see availability 90 days in good place. I mean, in good places in Milan, good places in Venice, and maybe up in some of the mountain locations too. Now, would I recommend waiting or not? Again, right, it's always this balance of what certainty do I want to have? I know I'm going, I know I'm landing, and right, it's hard. I mean, and I witnessed this in the Paris group a lot. There's people, it is they feel this like like in their inner they have to have it like all set aside right now. We have people booking Airbnbs 14 months out, which we know will oftentimes get canceled, but they just want to know. And so I think you have to balance that with what your budget and your other constraints are. And what I always say is when you find a place you like in a location you like for a price you should probably pull the trigger. And I think everyone feels differently about that. And so there's some people who don't care and they're like, hey, well, if I, maybe I have some tickets, maybe I don't. If I don't get something in Cortina, but I can get in the next town over from it, I'm fine with that. And so I think it depends on the individual. I personally like to have things at least 6 months in advance. That's what my general level of tolerance is.
You mentioned Airbnb, and Airbnb was officially involved with Paris. Do they have any connection with the Milan organizers?
I mean, they're still a top sponsor, so they have whether it's announced or not. There's likely something. Is it going to have the same as Paris? We'll see.
I don't expect there's as many Airbnbs in Bormio as there were in Paris.
Yeah, but I think I mean it is a ski town, right?
It's true.
When you think about these locations, these are normal resort towns that people go to in the winter. Our cousins who live in Florence and grew up there, they're born there and grew up there. They told me about all of their winter trips going up to the Cortina and the Dolomites to do so. It is also a very it's a tourist attraction for people, whether it's a city or other countries, to come and visit. So I expect that there is, on an ongoing basis, there's some level of that, whether it's you want to call it vacation rentals, whether you want to call it Airbnbs, however it's managed. There's definitely some level of the population and some level of the homes in those areas that will be available.
What are we seeing in hospitality packages already?
Well, I think it's early, right? I think we're going to see a lot of the same things that we saw in Paris. I think the challenge that everyone is working through right now is how do you like it if you're a hospitality provider or if you're a Olympic committee or anyone who's operating these various, whether it's the houses, whether it's hospitality programs, you're actually having to make some choices, right? Am I going to operate in 3 clusters? Am I going to operate 1 or 2 clusters? Where will the Team USA house be? Probably Milan. Will there also be one up in Cortina? Maybe, right? That's what the House of Switzerland's planning to do. At least those two. Maybe you have some sponsors that are more oriented towards park sports or snowboarding, so they'll do something up there. They're still getting put together in terms of what are the hospitality options going to look like. I think it's going to be narrower than it was your options in Paris, simply just because the volume is very different in terms of what you see there. But we'll see a significant portion of the tickets and the premium events go through hospitality. That's what makes the most sense for the organizers and for everybody running, is that those premium assets, just like whether it's a Super Bowl or anything else, are going to go through a hospitality like program.
When do you expect that we'll be seeing those? Because certainly for Paris, we were seeing them at this point.
Yeah, we're probably a few months away.
Really?
I think so. Might be sooner.
We don't know is the answer, Ken.
We don't know. I have a sense of for when it will be. We don't know, but probably the next few months. There's a few things are still being finalized.
Okay, getting around Milan. I know there's public transportation.
Easy.
Oh, thank you so much for saying
Oh,
that.
it's in less than 6 hours, I hit every venue in Milan.
So was
And
this
when you
buses, trams? What was the
100% metro, 100% metro.
nice?
And all of the metro, there's a metro station near all of the venues. And what I thought was very well laid out is that most of the venues are on ends of different lines. And so if you even think about events starting similar times, ending different times, like congestion, I was thinking about this when I was there in the experience. I'm like, there's not going to be like this choke point where people are coming out of ice hockey, but also they're coming out of speed skating. And all of a sudden there's going to be this crush at one particular, metro station or metro line, in terms of how those things are, how it's laid out across the city. It was, like I said, it took me like maybe 4 or 5 hours to see every single venue, starting from the hotel I was staying in was close to the, central train station.
How lost am I gonna get?
Well, if you figured out Paris, you'll figure out Milan.
I appreciate your confidence, Ken.
Yeah, the metro is very easy to use. I would say the cars were bigger than in Paris, and it operated very efficiently. I mean, again, it was summer of 2023. I found it very easy to get around. I actually did drive up because my cousin was getting married in Florence, and then that's when we decided to tack on these and ended the trip to go do this. I drove up from Florence to Milan, but once I was in Milan, I didn't drive the car at all. We used this, the metro to get to wherever we needed to. It was very, very accessible, very easy to use, very safe.
How much Italian do you need?
I don't speak any, and I'll be able to get by. And don't try Spanish; it doesn't work well.
No, then they'll get mad at you.
Yeah,
And definitely don't try French.
no, no. It's like I would say most modern cities in the world. Milan is a very modern metropolitan city, and we have all these phones and technologies. And if we need things translated, we just put it up. It's not, and I don't tend to be. Is they're going to think that everyone's going to speak English to me, but in situations where I need to figure out something, there's technology and capabilities that I can figure that out. The good news is I know most Italian foods, so at least ordering off a menu makes it very easy even without that. And there's a couple things I really like.
Kitchen Italian is what you have.
Yes, that's right.
What else do we need to know to get ready?
It's a standard when I think about planning. I think what's most important, briefly talked about it, is that more than ever, you really want to plan out what events you want to go to. It's just like any event. I know people will want to go and like do tourism and see other things. So maybe the only time they go to Italy, but because of the distribution of the venues, your trip is going to be driven by what sports are operating in what clusters at what time. And so, so you just start by laying your schedule out with that. And then once you have that, then you can start worrying about flights. You can start worrying about trains. You can start worrying about hotels. And unless you're going to stay in Milan, unlike Paris, you may need to plan to have 2 or 3 different hotels and maybe pack lighter than you normally would. Me, if I'm going to be in 2 or 3 hotels, I probably bring a little less Team USA gear than I normally would than if I'm going to be one, right? Where if I'm just one, I have no problem bringing 2 suitcases and just storing them in the apartment or whatever it is for a month. So those are the things if you're not a cold weather person, I would invest in, some folks like me from Southern California who I don't ski. I don't really go. I'm more of a beach person than a mountain person. You're probably going to want to invest in some good gear, some boots, some beanies, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of Team USA or Canada or whoever you support gear that will help outfit you for that. I think that those are the things that I think about. It's really, and I always say save time for the other things, right? Whether it's the hospitality houses. One of the things that's very different about Winter Games is that they don't necessarily have the ceremony in terms of the awarding the medals at the venue. Yes, there's a few that do. Figure skating is a good example of that. But that's going to happen in Milan, in one of the greatest squares in Europe. And so I think when you think about your planning too, you may want to, if you had a ticket, usually the way it's worked, they haven't announced it officially yet, is that if you had a ticket for an event that day, you get access to this area to be able to go see the medal ceremonies. And so I think that's something that's very different. So when you think about your evenings, hey, maybe it's dinner, Maybe it's a house, but now you have this thing that happens. And again, there was a little bit of this at Paris, and it was more or less popular depending on who you talked about it. But you actually will see the athletes getting their medals for the very first time. They're in Milan, and I think that's something that's very unique to it, or more unique to a Winter Games than maybe a Summer Games, where almost every single medal is awarded at the event or at the next session for that particular event, like athletics.
We haven't talked at all about Paralympics. I know that's not your bailiwick, but do
Yeah.
you know differences, other things we're going to need to know for Paralympics versus Olympics?
I don't nothing that is different, like materially different than what I know from Paris or other sorts. I'm guessing, right, the same sort of accessibility challenges exist more throughout Europe than they do in the US. And so I would say those are some of the things I think about. And I think going back to your other question about other things to think about, the Winter Games are different than Summer Games in a couple of key areas. And one of the areas is that not every event is great in person. When I say that is that, yes, you'll get the experience, but depending on how passionate you are about a sport, you might only catch a tenth of a second of it on the track. So when you think about those sorts of events where maybe not the entire time you're cheering the team or kind of experience it in the venue, you want to think about what is the rest of the experience that you want to have while you're in that venue. And that's one thing that has probably surprised me more that I didn't really think about before I went to Pyeongchang was that, whether it was downhill or with some of the others, right, you just see the last 10 seconds of that and you're watching the rest on the screen. You want to think about, well, where do I want to be? What are the people I want to be around in the venue? If I know that my country, do I want to be around the fans for those are the sort of experience versus just particular watching, or am I going to choose, I actually want to watch that particular event in a house? So I think you want to maybe think about some of the sports that way to determine where you want to be, where you think you're going to have the best experience, right? People ever want to say the best experience is, they're in venue, but there are also some of these events that have other alternate viewing options that are almost as powerful as that too.
But you got to be around the Italians for biathlon. Jill will definitely want to be
I
to
want to be
see those
there.
screaming fans.
It's just gonna be
Yeah.
hard. It's gonna be that's the challenge, I think, is where can you go and how long will travel take versus what you're gonna be able to watch.
Yeah, you're so right. I think when you think about your schedule, yeah, so you can get away with 3 sessions a day in Paris. I did several of those. I think you're running a lot of risk if you try that in Cortina because the one thing that we're going to know is we can't predict weather in February. Will a snowstorm come in? And what are the traveling conditions? And now is it going to take an extra 25 minutes to get from Cortina to the biathlon venue? And what does that mean? So I think as we talk about this is you're probably going to want to pad, if you're in Milan, right, go for it, right? But I think if you're doing the mountain travel, I think you're going to want to look at really padding your schedule and making sure that you have spare time because unpredictable things will happen.
And events get postponed. I mean, I think we only had one day in Paris where anything got postponed because of weather, and that was because of
Yes,
thunderstorms.
yes.
But in the winter, it's a very different story.
Yeah, there's some events that if there's downhill's an example, right? Too much wind, you simply have to wait for the next day. Surfing's another one of those. But outside of that, and then to your point, the BMX and everything that was in the in that particular park was basically postponed for a day because of those thunderstorms in Paris.
They are selling tickets to sliding, which I thought was interesting because we don't actually know if sliding is going to be there.
I sure hope it is. I really hope it is. It is a beautiful location. So when I was there in 2023, and then I've posted some pictures on this previously, maybe I went up and walked, and it was just yellow tape. There was no cement. It was all dirt, and you could see it. But from that point on the hill and the view from there, I really hope that sliding does take place there in Cortina.
There's still no cement.
There's no. I thought I've seen some recent pictures
No,
where
we were
there's some.
we were talking about this last week that supposedly there is no cement in some places and possibly some cement in some others.
Okay, and that's probably what I would expect for this point in time. And right, there's the whole system with like the screens and awnings and reversing the cooling for heating. And I wish them Godspeed and hopefully compete. I would love to see it there. I would. I mean, it just that cluster, that area, I think is just were phenomenally beautiful. The people there were super friendly. The food was great when we were there. I sure hope it happens.
One of the hiccups I thought in the Paris ticketing system was the resale platform, especially with resale tickets going offline 12 hours before an event. So if
Yeah,
you wanted something last minute, you couldn't get it last minute. If you wanted to sell it last minute, you couldn't sell it last minute.
yeah,
Have you
that's not
heard
ideal.
anything about that? If they're able to tweak it a little bit better for Milan?
Yeah, there, we'll see. I mean, so that there was the other kind of point of contention with it was that it still showed available, even when it was sitting in someone else's cart before it was gone. So, normal resale, like whether it's one of the things that we have here, whether it's Ticketmaster resale or TickPick or SeatGeek or one of the others that are out there, right? It's not this 1,000 people trying to refresh the same page at the same time. But a lot of frustration that people talk, would say to me is, "Hey, Kay, how come it's still saying it's available even though it's in someone else's cart?" And that, so I think that's one aspect. And to your point, I think the 12-hour thing should be adjusted. I'm sure there's a reason for it, whether it was security and they felt like they needed to check it, background. Who knows what was going on for that? There's no reason under normal operations. Well, I'll say Olympics are very different, just like FIFA World Cup. Olympics is the most complicated event to pull off in the world. There's nothing that's FIFA World Cup is the next closest thing to it in terms of number of events, number of locations, 400 events in 17 days. It just doesn't exist in the world. But getting it down to being like an hour or less would, I think benefit a lot of people.
And you couldn't discount either. You had to do face value.
Yeah. I don't know if that was really a problem. I don't know if the discounting really drove there to be a lot not resold. Yes, and maybe in some of the lower demand events, yes. But everything from swimming to, you could sold some of those tickets that had double the price of what people. I mean, I know of people who were trying to find tickets through other and offering ungodly amounts of money for the gold medal basketball final. Hearing people asking, offering 20 grand to get these tickets that are face value at $1,000. And I think that's the other question is we also look towards LA. Even beyond this is are we going to have a more, let's call it, normal market where people do set prices? That's kind of what we have, and people argue both sides of it. Well, then regular fans can't get tickets, and the other side of it is, hey, it's driven demand. If there was not a market for the ticket at that particular price, then no one would buy it, and probably both people have a point, but that's just kind of the market that we have here. I think to your point, some of the ticketing pricing right now, some of it I thought was I won't say aggressive is the right word, but more costly than what I thought some of the events would be. So we'll see how that plays out in terms of demand and what actually gets purchased.
Yeah, I was seeing on a lot of the Facebook groups and on the boards, people complaining that the prices seemed a little high.
People are always going to complain about that, though, right?
Again, it's hard to compare, right? Because the
Yeah,
games are so different
yeah.
over the past few cycles.
Yeah, it's very different. You look at some of them, figure skating finals, I mean, you can charge whatever you want for them. You can. Ice hockey final, same thing. And then we let's look for the pricing, maybe opening closing ceremonies. We'll see what the demand is for those. I would say that those aren't complete. Like if you even took Pyeongchang prices, which I think were 1,400, roughly were 14 equivalent of 1,400 US dollars for like A's. I think these are 2,900. You probably run inflation or whatever it is. You probably get close to something around 2,500 bucks. So maybe 2,900 euros isn't too far off from that. We'll see what the hospitality prices are, right? If you're looking at 2,900, you're probably looking at 10,000 euro for a hospitality ticket for that same category. So yeah, you're right. We don't have a great comparison, but I think if you just kind of look back to what the pricing was, and we know what the demand was in Pyeongchang, but and you kind of fast forward, I don't think anything's too out of line. I just don't know if the demand is such the case that we had in Paris. Again, ice hockey final, figure skating finals. We're definitely going to see incredible demand for those events.
What are you most excited for to see?
I really enjoy curling so much more than I expected in Pyeongchang. So I'm definitely that's why I'm going to get up to Cortina. I'm definitely going to get up there. I do want to see Nathan Chan. I want to see him skate. There's a few things along those lines that are probably the most exciting for me. And I just enjoy being around people at the Olympics. And Team USA House is where I spent quite a bit of time. Last few, I'll spend some great time meeting a lot of great people, friends I have now, and friends I'll meet along the way. So I'm not a winter sports fan for the most part. I'm much more of a summer. So for me, it's really about enjoying meeting and talking with people and having a good experience. So I'll probably spend a little bit more time, city side. It's going to be really hard, right? Your first Olympics of any kind, I think, is very difficult to surpass. And my first Winter Games was Pyeongchang, and to see Chloe Kim win, to be there when Shaun White had to hit, that last magical run to win the gold medal. Like, I saw some things that if I look at top 10 events of I've been to all time, those things start ticking up there. And I'm not sure yet what those will be for Milan Cortina yet. But as we start progressing, we start seeing who's going to be there, who's going to make it. I think there are always those stories every single Olympics. But as I look at it, I don't know if I'm going to have that same experience. It would be able to beat that. But also, I think I'm really looking forward to getting back to Cortina. Like, if you can't tell, it left an impression on me that I was not expecting my visit for the first time about 18 months ago.
I want to ask a quick LA question because we've been
Yeah.
seeing you're in that neck of the woods. Has the fire damaged any of the venues, and are there concerns?
It's a really difficult question to answer. It's just an absolute terrible tragedy and just an unsurmountable loss, right? People I know lost homes, and it's going to take time. And I'm not going to get into whether it's 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever that number is. That fire ended up, I think, about 3 miles north of where the Santa Monica Pier is. So if you look at the closest sort of venue to where that location is, and then also the Eden Fire up north is maybe closest to the Rose Bowl, for example, would be one of the potential venues. There's not an immediate impact there, but when you look at housing, when you look at availability, we don't know what it'll be. Three. Gosh, it's a little over 3 years from now. What it will be, there'll be some impacts. City has to make the decisions. The state, they have to come in and help and get it, hopefully help it build back as quickly as possible. But I think it's too early for me and I'm not in a position to speculate if there would be any, significant impacts one way or the other.
Well, Ken Hanscom, thank you so much as
Yeah.
always. One of these days we'll
Thank you.
actually get to meet you in person.
Yeah, I don't what happened. I don't know what happened in Paris. I know what happened in Paris. They got out of control for me. I've never done so much stuff in my life, and you know what? I loved every single minute of it. It was, I feel like I rolled Paris and Tokyo all into one, and everything I ever wanted to do in my life, I kind of fit into that 17 days. Cortina might be much slower for me.
Thank you so much, Ken. You can find Ken on Insta and X. He's ticket manager is at Ticket Manager, and his personal account is at Ken Hanscom. You know what else you need for a winter escape?
A book.
That's right. If you are trying to get through the rest of winter, I don't know if I think Groundhog's Day is kind of ridiculous because it was Groundhog's Day this week, and some places you saw a shadow, some places you didn't. Winter always ends when it ends.
And on Groundhog Day here, it snowed. So I stayed inside, actually reading the next book for our Patreon shows.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So yes, we're doing a lot of reading this year. So if you need a book, look through our shop on bookshop.org/shop/flamealivepod and find a title or two to get you through the rest of winter. Bookshop.org now has ebooks. So if you prefer reading on a tablet, you've got that option as well. With your purchases through our store link, you not only support small booksellers, but you also support the show and help keep our flame alive, which is very necessary this time of year as we look ahead to trying to get to Milan Cortina. Again, that's bookshop.org/shop/flamealivepod. If you want to get some books and don't know what to do, maybe try Beyond Expectations, our next book club, which is by Sydney Collier, a Shukflastani. So
We
it's a
love
win-win.
Shukflastani authors.
If you're a Patreon patron, we are also reading Tiger Bell by Wyoming Attias next. So that's a good read. I'm just telling you that right now. It's a good read. So check out those books and more at our bookshop.org site, bookshop.org/shop/flamealivepod.
C'est une fête de musique.
Oui. We have some Paris 2024 news. French President Emmanuel Macron announced on X that the balloon cauldron will come back to the Parisian sky every summer until LA 2028. It will be in the Tuileries Gardens. It'll be there from June 21st, which is when an annual music festival takes place, and then it will go all through the summer to September 14th when there is a new sports festival happening in the area. He's really milking this cauldron.
That was a lot of money. So I don't blame him for trying to get his money's worth, his francs worth. Wait, there's no francs left. His euros worth out of that balloon.
I know, and I think it's just like, we need the magic back. My life is not, the political situation in France is a little tough right now. Let's bring back that magic because, man, that garden was just packed with people all the time.
And that balloon would go up at night, and it was a 24-hour event.
Yes.
When it went up and down. So, yeah, not good on you, Emmanuel Macron. Wear that dress again. Oh, man.
Continuing on with Paris 2024 news, we have some doping issues going on. Belgian dressage rider Domien Michels was disqualified from Paris 2024 for an anti-doping rule violation, according to the International Testing Agency, after his individual competitive results during the dressage team Grand Prix event. He tested positive for dorzolamide, a banned substance, which it was apparently an inadvertent positive because he got it from giving his dog eye drops.
Wow.
If he had taken the eye drops himself, that would have been an okay use. But if it gets on through your skin or some other inadvertent way, topically or transdermally, then it is a banned substance because it can be a diuretic or a masking agent. So that is how he got the ban. He accepted his disqualification. That only affected the individual results. And that also did not affect the podium or the diploma levels for that competition. The Belgian team finished 5th in the dressage team Grand Prix, but their results were not disqualified.
Okay, I'm going to totally defend this guy because he's taking care of his dog.
I knew
That
you would
is
be.
wild.
I knew you would be upset about this.
Yeah, you take care of your dog. You're giving his eye just poor thing had a little infection probably that was like oozing, and then the dog is scratching at his face all the time, and he's just trying to be a good dog owner. I mean, and it's dressage, so he's taking care of an animal. Wow,
That is tough.
wow. I'm going to be mad about this now the rest of the day. Andiamo a Milano.
Well, it is 1 year to go exactly today, the day we release this show. 1 year to go till the Olympics. So a lot of 1 year to go information is up and running. And of course, that means an update on the bobsled novella.
Tell me, Jilla, what is happening?
Oh my gosh, this is great. Andrew Dampf of the Associated Press wrote a very long 1 year to go article, reports that during a visit to the track, Fabio Saldini, the Italian government commissioner in charge of the construction project, said that almost 70% of the track was completed. I do not know what 70% means. Yeah, because I just went, well, you've got a construction project that is on a tight time frame. Is that 70% of the track? 70% of the whole project? What are we talking about here? And maybe
Don't worry, Jill.
and
We get it done.
Yeah. Well, Damp noted that it was hard to tell actual progress through all of the construction work. So, don't know. He did report that 180 people are working on the project every day from 6 a.m. until 1 a.m. to get it done. That is a lot. That is a lot of hours. I hope there are shifts. Ice is supposed to go on at the beginning of March, and its testing will happen during March in order to render it safe for use. And then there's a test event in October. Very important because, as one of the many articles I read about this said, hey, don't forget 2010 when we had a fatal crash on the track. So it definitely needs to be tested, and we'll see what happens in the progress. AP also reported that 800 trees have been cut down to make room for this track. And supposedly I'm going to try to say this with a straight face, but I really can't. Supposedly they will be planting 10,000 when they're done.
Well, if they're just throwing seeds down, that's pretty easy. Yeah, we're just gonna scatter 10,000 seeds. That's 10,000 trees right there. I hope they at least did something with those 800 trees, like that wood didn't just get
Yeah, you
thrown
hope.
out.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see how many trees actually make it to the site. Because if you made room for a track, there's also no room to. Where are you putting the trees? What? Tell me that.
So if you write to the Arbor Day Foundation, at least this was true like 20 years ago, they will send you a tree, and the tree is about 4 inches high. So maybe they have some agreement with the Arbor Day Foundation and they're getting like these little tiny trees that they're just gonna put everywhere.
And then hope the squirrels don't eat them.
Do they have squirrels in Italy?
I don't know. They'll have some little
If
animal that likes to eat nuts and tree roots.
Well, they have ermine, which is
Yeah.
the mascot.
Yes, exactly. So there you go.
Stoats, excuse me,
Yes,
that's the
yes.
Italian word for it.
Lake Placid is going to be Plan B because it required no investment from Milan Cortina. Remember how Innsbruck was ready to go. All these other places in Europe were like, yeah, we'll host. We have no problem hosting, except for we need a few million to fix up the track. So, and Milan does not want to do that and invest in some other countries' bobsled facilities.
Well, they're working 20 hours a day. Can you imagine how over budget this project is gonna be? I
Oh,
can't
with
wait
all
for that
the overtime.
report.
Oh my gosh. To the Plan B, the organizing committee president, Giovanni Malago, said it's just a formality. There's no substance to it. So he does not think there will be a Plan B put into action.
You know what else there's no substance to? This track getting done on time. Malago, I think you need to go. Start hammering.
So in their 1 year to go article, Elvira Polina, Cristiano Corvino, and Claudia Greco from Reuters talked with Cortina Mayor Gianluca Lorenzi, who downplayed the situation also, and said there are backups for everything, but as of today, a plan B for the bob races does not exist anymore because it has been made clear the sliding center is being built here. It may be being built, but will it be done? I mean,
I'm very glad they have a plan B. I am happy on the one hand because it is in Lake Placid. I am sad on the other hand for those sliders if they do end up in Lake Placid and don't get to participate in the Olympic part of this. But at least we know their races, unlike in, what was it, 1960, where they just didn't happen.
oh, right. Because I had to think for a minute.
Yeah, in California, where
yeah,
they
in
just didn't
California,
build a
yes,
track and there was no
yes.
sliding.
Yeah, true. But I mean, when you think about it, how much of an Olympic experience are most of these athletes going to have because they're so spread out? How many are going to take the time to get to Milan for the opening ceremonies or get to Verona for the closing ceremonies or mingle with other sports? Because that's always the fun part. There's going to be just not so much of that, I think, just in
I think
general.
it's going to feel like another week on the World Cup circuit.
Yeah, for a lot of
Sadly.
people, I think it is. So I think if Lake Placid does end up being it, I think they're going to try to do something to make it super special. So
And what a boon for that area of New York State, which is struggling financially.
right. I also love the fact that Amsterdam in the AP article kind of starts out with Sochi being so far behind with their construction and Rio being insanely far behind, and John Coates saying there's no plan B for Rio. We have to go to Rio. So I think from those two elements, at least, they got so worried that they made sure that a plan B is in place because they don't want to go through this again. The
Yeah,
IOC,
they've had enough of this.
right? And you would
And you
think,
know what? It's their own fault because they went to Italy and they didn't go to Scandinavia where everything would have been flat packed and done and on budget.
that's right. Other 1 year to go elements. The AP article also talks about tickets. Private boxes for the opening ceremony at San Siro Soccer Stadium have already sold out. And then hospitality packages are going. And so far, the most popular ones are for ice hockey, biathlon, and figure skating. Very interesting.
Shocking.
Not shocking. Still more construction going on to build the Livigno Snow Park, which is a venue for freestyle and snowboard, as well as the Milano Santa Giulia ice hockey arena, which I will include a link to this article in the show notes because they have pictures of the construction. And the picture dated January 15th. The outside of this ice hockey arena is still being built.
It doesn't look good.
It does not look good. And I don't know how much of the inside. And I know stuff can go up fast. I mean, they're building a Dick's Sporting Goods not that far away from me. And we're surprised at how quickly that's going up. But let's come on. That's a Dick's compared to a ice hockey arena is,
I do want to say, it is very good. You're doing great with these Italian words.
Thank you.
These Italian names. You're doing better than I am. My ancestors are just like beating me right now.
Well, it's eating a lot of pasta. That's what's doing it to me. Reuters also noted that 90% of Italy's ski slopes rely on artificial snow because they're already talking about climate change and how that is affecting the area. Milan Cortina will be using the Italian company Techno Alpin for its snow guns. They also supplied Beijing 2022, so we're in good hands. They know what they're doing. And snowmaking systems are already in place all over Italy, so this should not be an issue for the making of snow. But I would not be surprised if we hear how much snow has to be made. There will be some 1 year to go events across the host regions. Specifically in Milan, the Omega Countdown clock is going to be unveiled, and that will be near the Piazza del Duomo. The Milano Cortina's 2026 Sports Village will also be opened, and there will be a ceremony at the Strahler Theater to officially invite the National Olympic Committees to the Games. Also, tickets go on sale.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. It is a lot. It's exciting. We know some of you are registered for ticket sales, so keep us posted. Especially, we've seen that in the Facebook group. Keep us posted on what you get, or drop us a line at flamealivepod@gmail.com if you're going. Let us know where you'll be.
Molto fantastico.
Right? And I want to know how the ticket buying process is going to go this time. We had a run with Paris 2024, but I'm looking forward not looking forward. I'm curious to see how the ticket sales process will go again and how smooth it will be, and if any of the hiccups that we saw in Paris will be taken care of.
I have no handy catchphrase for LA because I do pretend to speak English.
Oh, we have a little bit of LA 2028 news. World Triathlon has introduced new rules that's going to affect LA 2028. We're going to start with the mixed relay. The order in Paris for the mixed relay was man, woman, man, woman. For LA, it will go back to the Tokyo 2020 order of woman, man, woman, man. And we'll give a hat tip to our friend Rich Perlman over at the Sports Examiner for that bit of info. I don't know why they want to go back. The Paris finish of the mixed relay with the women finishing was super exciting because the podium was decided within a couple of seconds each other, and they needed a photo finish for silver and bronze. It was a wild, wild race. And other rule changes, drafting penalty times have been reduced. Athletes will now be allowed to wear uniforms with elbow-length sleeves. And then to avoid injuries, finger and toenails will need to be short in order for the athlete to be authorized to start. I don't want to be the person who has to check that. I can, if we want volunteer jobs or officiating jobs, I do not want to be the person who has to check fingers and toes.
I think that would be fun. I mean, I understand the fingernails. Like, a lot of the acrylic nails are very popular, and I can see, and we've seen athletes certainly on the track wearing some very, very long nails. But that they had to specifically call out toenails is a little concerning.
Well, I mean, when they're in the water, they're so bunched together that you just get scratched. I've done a couple of triathlons, and yes, you are clumped together, you get kicked, you probably get scratched, you get grabbed at. It's pretty rough there in the water.
Yeah, but who's got talons on their toes?
Well, maybe they're scraggly. Who knows?
I would love that job. And I'd be like, ooh, these piggies are too long. Except, you know what I would end up doing? I'd end up, I'm a terrible person because if I see a foot, I'm like, I'm tickling that foot. Just be happy I never did that to you in Paris.
I'm relieved. I have to put my feet in a box now. Keep them away from you. Also forbidden, jewelry and watches. Jewelry I get. Watches is an interesting choice because everybody's got a watch on to time how they're doing and keep track of their time. The head ref may authorize watches, though, for a specific race. Swim water quality standards have also changed for levels of enterococci and E. coli. Water used to have to be excellent quality. Now, good is okay.
Ooh.
We'll see how that goes. I wonder if levels in Paris were just so enough that I wonder what the quality does health-wise versus what it does in delaying races. Does that make
But
sense?
but we know that triathletes got sick.
Well, that's right. So, well, we'll see how that goes. We've got a few years to figure out if good is really good enough. Any cancellations due to water quality will now be done by a minimum 3-person committee that includes medical people rather than a single person making that call.
The Grande Montagne.
Ooh, I like that. All
I haven't
right.
forgotten all my French.
We have some news from France 2030. Former biathlete Martin Fourcade, also esteemed Olympian, he has withdrawn his application to lead the 2030 Winter Games in France. The AP reports that there were too many differences of opinion about basic elements like the mode of governance and the vision of the project. L'Equipe notes that Fourcade did not like the fact that the organizing committee's headquarters would be near Lyon. And Lyon is close to the Alps, but apparently does not have an identity that aligns with mountains like, say, Grenoble. Fourcade is an IOC member, so he will be part of the board of directors for those games, but that's a very limited role compared to the Tony Estanguet of the whole project. Some are not sorry to see him go. Renaud Mousselet, president of the Provence-Alpes Côte d'Azur region, said it was interesting that Fourcade's all upset about the choice of Lyon as the headquarters when that has been known for a few months. Mousselet also said, and this was all to AFP, said that Fourcade was a loner who could not work in a team. Snap.
My God, going after Martin.
Feng Shu says there are other candidates for the job, including biathlete Vincent Jay and freestyle skier Marie Martineau. The leadership for the organizing committee is due to be announced on February 18th. There are only 5 years to go.
I know, it's so funny because we've talked about how far ahead, say, LA 28 was awarded. And these were awarded on the old system, in terms of the 7-year, and we've totally forgotten about them.
No, they weren't awarded in the 7 years. They were awarded less, I thought.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
It was last year.
Yeah. So they were awarded with maybe 5.5, a little bit more years to go. And that is such a tight time frame. That's the tightest time frame yet, I think, for Winter Games, at least. Even if you do have a lot of venues ready to go, because obviously they're going to use venues, much like Milan Cortina is using stuff that's on World Cup circuits all the time. So they're basically ready to go for an Olympics. They'd have to be zhuzhed up for games, but you still have to get some of your ice venues going and things like that, especially with, again, another regional games, because stuff was going down to Nice, remember?
Right. Yeah, this will be interesting, these next 2 Winter Games,
Right.
as to what the direction of Winter Games are going.
Because we also, Salt Lake City's been in the news a lot, at least in our news headlines, because, well, A, they just got awarded officially, but B, they've been ready for a long, long time. They don't have much to do. And
They could host the sliding events. They could host the whole thing if they had to.
Right. So it's really interesting to see this juxtaposition of Salt Lake City, which is we're ready and we've been ready, and they don't have the games for 9.5 years, or it's 9 years to go, I guess, until 2034. And we have Brisbane 2032 so far out. It's just kind of weird that this one's so close. And it's going to fall through the cracks. Like, it keeps falling through the cracks in my memory, but they're going to really have to work hard.
You know what else is falling through the cracks? Because it's not a city.
Yes.
Because it's like French Alps. What does that mean? I mean, at least Milan Cortina, it's a lie that it's Milan Cortina, but so is Beijing for that matter. I mean, all these Winter Games, there's
Right.
always a split. Even Salt Lake City, we have Salt Lake City and then the mountains. But they don't have a good name for it, and that doesn't help.
No, that's very true. But that's interesting when you talk about, like, some of the presidential candidates for the IOC job want to make more regional games or games around the world. Well, so much of an Olympics, you're right, gets tied to a city identity. Where do you go if it's just a region?
And is it just then a World Cup event? Especially for winter, because summer, at least you're always going to have a bunch of events in one place.
Mhm.
You'll always cluster some things. But winter, they have the men's and the women's downhill in Cortina not happening anywhere near each other.
I noticed that today too. Like the women's is in Cortina and the men's is someplace else. Is it
In Bormio.
Which is probably not odd for them, but it's odd to me as somebody who would think skiing would all be in alpine skiing would all be in one place. But okay, this will be interesting to see how it shakes out. Can't wait to see what its novella is going to be.
Welcome to TKFLASTAN.
Now is the time in the show where we check in with our team Keep the Flame Alive. These are past guests and listeners of the show who make up our citizenship of our very own country, TKFLASTAN.
Pole vaulter Katie Moon won the women's pole vault at the Dodds Invitational in Manhattan, Kansas, with a world-leading vault of 4.8 meters.
At the end of January, cross-country skier Bruna Mora competed at Hohenzollern in Germany. She picked up FIS points for a 24th place finish in a 1.6 kilometer sprint and a 35th place finish in a 10K.
Snowboarder Chloe Kim won the women's halfpipe at the FIS World Cup in Aspen, Colorado. She's having a rip-roaring season, man.
Good for her. The women's Nordic Combined Tour was in Seefeld, Austria for 3 days of competition. Our Annika Malasinski placed 22nd, 11th, and 15th. She will be competing at the Nordic Combined World Cup in Otepää, Estonia next week. It's 3 weeks to go into the World Championships, and she is currently ranked 15th in the world. Good for her.
I know. Erin Jackson was back in form for the ISU World Cup race in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She placed second in both the women's first 500 meters and the second 500 meter races.
At the 2025 USA Curling National Championships, Team Schuster made it to the playoff round, but lost to the eventual winners, Team Dropkin, 3-11 in the semifinal. That was a big discrepancy.
Terrence Burns is teaching the globalization of sport at Belmont University in Nashville. If you feel the need to go back to school.
Someday he's going to let us audit. Someday. And congratulations to our friend Ben Waterworth and the gang over at Off the Podium for once again topping the podium in the Sports Podcast Awards. They won for Best Olympics and Paralympics Podcast. Sadly, we did not finish in the top 3. That's going to do it for this episode. Let us know what you're looking forward to in Milan Cortina.
And we love hearing from you. You can chat with us and other listeners on our Facebook group, Keep the Flame Alive Podcast. Email us at flamealivepod@gmail.com. The voicemail and text line is always open at 208-352-6348. That's 208-FLAME-IT. And if you need more Olympics and Paralympics in your life, and who doesn't, you can sign up for our newsletter at flamealivepod.com. We'll have a link to that in the show notes.
Next week, we're going back in time. We are once again celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Sydney 2000 Olympics and Paralympics with 2 more stories from those games. Also, please do not forget to get a book or 2 through our bookshop.org site to keep the show going. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, keep the flame alive.